chapter 26 and verse number 22. And David answered and said, "Behold the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch it." I want to deal with the subject tonight. If I give a title, it would be this: Returning the Spear, the Fear of Forgiveness. In this portion of our text, for some time, Saul has been after the life of David. Ever since David killed Goliath and then, and then David became very well known for his ways in military, and Saul even at one point, trying to get David killed, told him he could have his daughter, but he had to go and kill so many Philistines and really prove himself. And Saul did this really knowing there's no way David could accomplish this. That David's life will be taken. Well, pretty soon here comes David having accomplished what Saul asked him to do. Well, instead of Saul being happy with this, it just stirred up his anger and his bitterness towards David. And we know at one point, in the beginning, so David is there and he is playing some music for Saul, comforting him. And Saul is thinking about this, and he takes his javelin or his spear and he throws it at David. And the Bible tells us that it sticks in the wall next to David. And then David, being, I think, a logical decision, ran. I mean, that seems like a good decision to me at that point in time. And so he runs. Well, then he comes back, and 2 or 3 times up to this point, Saul has thrown his spear at David, has thrown his javelin at David, trying to kill him. This is a regular occasion, a regular reaction of Saul. It's the way as anger builds up in him, as David is remaining faithful and loyal. His anger builds up, and then he launches his spear at him, trying to take his life. Fortunately for David, he's not a very good shot. And so he misses most of the time. Every time. Or you could just say it was a work of the Lord. But his life was saved up to this point. So several times up to this point, Saul has thrown his spear at David. He has even sent his army out to kill him. And at this particular moment, in 1 Samuel chapter number 26, Saul has his men, over 400 men or 600, different verses kind of reference different things, but a large number of men that are there, and they are literally going to find David and kill him. In the first verse of chapter number 6, the Ziphites come unto Saul, and they tell Saul, "I think we know where David is. We know where he's hiding." So Saul gathers up his army, and they are going out for one reason and one reason alone. And that is to find David and to take his life. That is the only thing that Saul wants to do at this point. And so as they are on this mission, they reach the nighttime. The evening comes. They've been searching all day, and they stop to camp overnight. As they find this place and they choose to camp overnight and to sleep, I want us to read starting in chapter 26, verse number 2. Verse number 2 of chapter 26, "Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000, there's your number, 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph." So a large number of men going for this reason. Verse 3, "Saul pitched in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon." Sounds like Brother Ben trying to read those African cities. By the way, but David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul was come in very deed. He was coming very determined to take David's life. So verse 5, "David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched, and David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner, the son of Ner, the captain of his host. And Saul lay in the trench, and the people pitched round about him." So Saul, of course, being in the middle, they're camped around him, keeping him safe. Then verse 6, "Then answered David and said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother to Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I'll go down with thee. I mean, these are the type of friends I want. Right? I mean, here they are. Here's Saul in the middle, surrounded with his 6,000 men. David sees them sleeping, sees this as an opportunity to go down there and said, hey, who wants to go with me? And then one of them stands up and says, I'll go with you. You know, I'll be by your side and certainly help you in this. Well, then we come to verse number 11, and as they get down there, they are successful in getting to Saul. We know that in verse number 6, the Ahimelech, the Hittite, ends up saying, hey, let's kill him. Here's your chance, David. Get revenge. Get Saul. This is your opportunity. Well, verse 11, he says this, the Lord forbid that I should stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. I'm not here to injure him. He says, but I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away, and no man saw it, nor knew it, neither awaked. For they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. Then David went over to the other side, another smart move, and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great space being between them. So here's Saul. At this point, 2 to 3 times, Saul has thrown his spear, thrown his javelin at David. David is on the run for his life. The entire army is coming after him, thousands of individuals, excuse me, and they're on their way. Well, David sees that they have pitched for the night. They're going to camp. He waits for them to fall asleep, goes down, does not hurt Saul, but rather takes the spear. And so he takes this spear and he takes a cruse of water that is there, and then he goes to the hill on the opposite side and waits for them to wake up. Well, after verse number 13, you could read all the way down through verse number 20, and they have this conversation back and forth where David says, I have your spear, I could have taken your life, but I chose not to. God gave you to me, he put you in my hands, but I was honorable and respectful, and I did not get revenge, but I let you live, and now I'm asking you, leave me alone. I could have taken your life, but I chose not to, and so now I'm asking you not to take my life. So we have this conversation between the two of them, and then we come to verse number 21, and we have this apology from Saul. Saul listening to David and understanding that he could have taken his life, but he chose not to. He says in verse 21, then said Saul, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool, and have erred exceedingly. Now this sounds great if this is the first time you're reading of this story. But if you've read this story, all 3 times that he threw that javelin before, he said the same thing. Oh, I'm so sorry, you're right, come back, David. I will never try to hurt you again. I made a mistake. I erred exceedingly. I don't know what I was thinking. I played the fool. What a foolish thing I did. I shouldn't have done that to you. You're right. You are more honorable to God, and you didn't do anything wrong, and it's just a mistake, and I'm sorry, and I'll never do it again. So we have this apology from Saul. This was not the first time Saul had apologized. It was not the first time Saul said he was sorry. And it was not the first time Saul said that he would never do it again. But I want to start in verse number 22. And I want you to look at David's response, knowing exactly what this situation is for what it is. He knows who Saul is. He knows what he said before. He knows the current situation. I want you to start in verse 22. David answered and said, after this one verse apology, David answered and said, behold the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and fetch it. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord did deliver thee into my hand today, but I would not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, blessed be thou, my son David, thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. But you have to keep reading into chapter 27, because this is not the end of the story. And David said in his heart, chapter 77, verse 1, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. Well, there's a great response to giving a spear back. I shall now one day, I shall perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines, and Saul shall despair of me to seek me anymore in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hand. He's going to keep trying to kill me. I mean, that's his response. Here he just gives us, you're better than I am. Verse 25, he says, you're blessed. You're going to end up doing great things. God's really going to use you, David. And I'm a fool and I messed up. I'm never going to do this again. God has something special for you. You're a real special person, David. And everything's wonderful and great. And David gives him his spear back. They go their separate ways. And the first thing David says is, this isn't over. This is not over. He is not changed. He still has something against me. He's still going to seek my life. And he's heard this apology before. He's heard all these words before. The thing I find interesting is that he still gave him his spear back. Knowing that it wasn't over. Knowing that there were still issues. Knowing that there was, if I could say, a possibility. Or we could use the word potential. Or maybe there was still a danger. And I want you to remember these three words as we think about the possibility, the potential, the danger that is there, and yet he still returned this spear. Because I think we're going to find that this idea of this forgiveness that David offers here as he gives his spear back, and I think some would even by their own way of maybe their own definition of forgiveness would not call this forgiveness, but I think we find David by his response that he puts it in the Lord's hands. And he forgives Saul and he puts the matter in the Lord's hands and he goes about his way knowing the potential, knowing the possibility and the danger, but yet still trying to do what is right. So returning the spear, the fear of forgiveness. Number one, forgiveness does not require persuasion. Forgiveness does not require for you to be persuaded that they're never going to do you wrong again. If that was the case, then God would not be forgiving of any of us. Because he is not persuaded that we're going to be perfect. He is not persuaded that we're never going to sin again. And when we come, how many times, even in each individual life, we could say, how many times have you said, God, I'm going to start praying every day. And God knows. But yet when you say, God, forgive me for not making prayer a serious matter, he still forgives. And when we come and we say, I've not been in my Bible, I've not been studying, I've not been reading the way I'm supposed to, God, I am sorry. He knows full well we're going to mess up again, and yet he forgives. But yet how many times in our own life we hold this forgiveness like it's a tool we have, and I'm only going to give this spear back if I am persuaded you're not going to throw it again. Well, we don't find that with David. Many say that being persuaded is a sign of true forgiveness. Oh, it's true forgiveness if you are persuaded that everything is going to be fine. That's not true forgiveness. Matter of fact, I would say that's unrealistic forgiveness. David was not persuaded through Saul's apology. David was not persuaded. He did not believe him. David did not say, as you and I might have said, Saul, why should I believe you? You've thrown this thing at me 3 times. And now you're standing and saying the same thing you said 3 times before. Why should I believe you now? You've gone against your word in the past. You have broken, you have broken this promise in the past. You have let me down in the past. You've said things. And by the way, Saul is saying this in front of people. It's not like some secret little on the side, David, I'm real sorry, but then meeting with the people and saying, let's get him. He is saying this in front of everybody. David, you are right and you are a better man than me and God's going to do great things for you. But David is not persuaded. Saul says, I'll do thee no more harm. David's not persuaded. He does not believe him. But yet he forgives. He returns the spear. Let me ask you this. How many of you would return a spear to someone if you were not persuaded they wouldn't throw it back at you? We're going to make some application here in a little bit, but first of all, forgiveness does not require persuasion. Number two, forgiveness does not require trust. Chapter 27, verse 1, David arose. David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. It doesn't require trust. Well, it's not real forgiveness unless you trust him. I would say that is unrealistic forgiveness. So David, here's David. He has this spear. He has the weapon that has been thrown against him, and he has the power to do with it whatever he chooses at this point in time. He can take it with him and say, I forgive you, Saul, but I'm not going to give you your spear back. I think you understand. That would be my logic. David, Saul, I'll forgive you, but we're not going to return this because there's a good chance you're going to do wrong with it again. There's a good chance you're going to break your commitment again. There's a good chance you're going to use it for harm again. Forgiveness does not require trust, but again, some might say that trusting is a sign of true forgiveness. Did you really forgive if you don't trust them? Well, I would say, how much does God trust you to not do wrong? How much does God trust you not to make a mistake? You say, well, that's more than a mistake, that's on purpose. Okay, how much does God trust you not to on purpose do something you shouldn't again? How much does God trust you to stay right in your thoughts and right in your life? Forgiveness does not require trust. David did not trust Saul. David did not trust his words. David did not trust his decision making. David did not trust, you could say, his temper. David did not trust his feelings. And he definitely doesn't trust his apology. As he returns the spear, he says, this is not going to go well. He's going to mess up again. But yet he returns the spear. Number three, as we build our way towards some application here, number three, forgiveness is allowing God to be in control. Forgiveness is putting it in God's hands. Look at verse number 23. David returns the spear. He says, bring somebody to get this. Now keep in mind how David feels according to chapter 27, verse 1. He's going to use this against me again. And so knowing of the possibility, remember those words, the potential, the danger, he turns and he gives this principle to Saul, which is a wonderful principle. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. Because I remind us tonight that ultimately every single person must answer to God. And we can do our best to hold the spears of life and to not allow there to be any potential or any possibility of this danger. But it doesn't matter what we hold on to. Every person will be held accountable to God. And every person will have to answer to what they do with their own spear, if you would. So David returns the spear, but he puts God in control. Some might say that forgiveness should come with some boundaries or limitations. I'll forgive you as long as, sounds like a good message. I'll forgive you as long as, I'll give you your spear back, Saul, as long as you make this commitment, as long as you make this promise, as long as you stay here, as long as you do this, as long as you say that. Well, here David says, the Lord is watching you, and it is the Lord who judges for right and wrong. And Saul, you individually need to make some decisions based upon what is right and wrong. I'm going to give you your spear back, but know that I cannot do anything compared to what God does. So he puts it in God's hands, and he allows God to be in control. Many people forgive while holding on to control. And I think we would question if it is forgiveness. Forgiveness is allowing God to be in control. David did not give a list of requirements. David did not say, okay, Saul, I'll return your spear, but if you do this again, here's what I'm going to do to you. And here's a long list of threats. It's not what he said. But rather, he returns the spear and he says, God knows what you're doing. God is watching. God is the one, as he says in verse 20, the Lord render to man, the Lord bless or the Lord take away, the Lord rewards, the Lord gives according to your righteousness or lack thereof, and your faithfulness or lack thereof. In other words, Saul, if your life comes to an end, it's not going to be because of me, because I could have done it, but it's in the Lord's hands. The Lord will handle you according to your righteousness and your faithfulness. Forgiveness is allowing God to be in control. Number 4, as we make our way to the application, and this is really the title, Forgiveness Returns the Spear. It returns the spear. Now, I want you to notice that it doesn't say forgiveness never takes the spear, but forgiveness returns the spear. There certainly was nothing wrong with David taking the spear and having this conversation, but there came a point where he had to give it back. Forgiveness returns the spear. Well, the spear might cause harm. Absolutely. There's possibilities there. Well, the spear might create problems. Certainly. There's great potential with this spear, as David has already seen. Imagine playing for the king in this relaxing state, and then the king himself launching this javelin and it's sticking in the wall next to you. He understands the hurt, he understands the possibility, he understands the fear, he understands the potential, he understands the danger. But yet he returns the spear. Well, the spear might be dangerous. Oh, it is. It is dangerous. There's no question about it, it's dangerous. So why did he return it? Returning the spear, that is taking a risk. Absolutely. Returning the spear, am I not setting myself up to be hurt? Possibly. Returning the spear, am I not giving some control for them to create more harm and more danger? Absolutely. You're giving up control. You're giving the spear back, if you would, knowing that there's a good chance they hurt again. So let me make, if I could, some brief applications, and then we'll just leave it in the Lord's hands. Number 1, when spears are thrown in a marriage, you have to reach a point that you give the spears back. A lot of times, trust is broken in a marriage. And one spouse or the other will hold that over somebody for the rest of their life. Sometimes it's not the type of trust we think of. Sometimes it's an early marriage decision that gets the family in a tough financial decision. And for the rest of their life, the husband or the wife, whichever one was making that decision, is never given control or thoughts or ideas about finances because something happened years ago. You know, all it is never returning the spear. Sometimes it's a relationship of the past. Sometimes it's not even the one that we're currently married to. Somebody before did something and hurt us or did something to us or lost our trust. And now we're holding on to this spear, and God in His grace has given us a partner and a spouse, somebody to live with and to love with, and we hold on to this spear, not giving it back. Why? Because there's possibility I'll get hurt again. There's potential that my feelings will get hurt again, my heart will get hurt again. There's a danger, I don't want to let go of that. Well, can I say forgiveness returns the spear? Yes, there's possibility. Yes, there's potential. Yes, there is danger. But we must reach a point where we give this back. And the reason is this, because the spear is not only used for bad. You don't have to fight alone. You can actually fight on the same side. You can fight for the same things in your marriage. You can fight for God to be in the middle of your marriage. And you can fight for the same goals financially and with your children in all of these areas. But yet in so many homes, one spouse is trying to fight and battle all alone because they're holding both spears. It reaches a point where we have to return it. Well, isn't there a possibility for it to go wrong? Absolutely. Absolutely. but there's also a possibility for it to go really well. Well, isn't there potential for danger and for hurt? Absolutely. But there's also a potential to gain trust. Well, isn't there a possibility of it hurting us and maybe creating more harm? Absolutely. But there's also a possibility that two are better than one. And that it's actually stronger and better and more productive. And God gets the glory for it. But yet many times when there is a spear thrown in our marriage, we hold on to that and we never give it back. Don't let the past steal the potential for a great marriage. Without a spear, how can they fight along with you for a good marriage? And what you'll end up happening is one person in the marriage has all the control. And here's where it comes down to. Not only are they fighting for life, but they're also fighting their partner who has no weapon, no power, no control, no say. Just along for the ride. Well, you reach a point in a marriage, we have to return the spear. Maybe it's not your marriage. This is a difficult subject I'm going to handle now. I certainly understand that and have been through it. But I would say when spears are thrown by our children, we must reach a point where we return the spear. Parents, we can't just take everything from them and never give them a chance. Because they're going to fail. They're going to make a mistake. Well, my child, they messed up on, let's say, they had a cell phone and they messed up bad and they did wrong. I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with taking the spear. But there has to come a time before they leave that house that you give the spear back. Well, isn't there potential for danger? Absolutely. Isn't there a possibility they'll mess up again? Yes. Aren't the same things there for them? And what if they mess up? And what if they fall? And what if they hurt themselves again? There's a chance they will. But there's also a chance they prove, because they know the same thing that God had this conversation with Saul, saying God is going to judge you for what you do, for the right and the wrong and your faithfulness to him. It is the same lesson we teach our children. I can't control you your whole life, but there is a God in heaven and he is the one who is watching you. And I return the spear knowing there's possibility and there's potential and there is danger that is there. But I return this knowing you might hurt yourself, but also praying to God that you don't. But that you take the spear and you fight alongside of us. I'll tell you, the only thing greater than a husband and wife, both with the spear fighting for the things of God, is when all the children are lined up right beside them, all moving forward, wanting to serve God and love God and be faithful to God, and on their own making right decisions, not because they don't have a choice, but because they do have a choice, and they have the spear, and there's possibility and potential for danger and harm, but yet they know that there's great responsibility in holding this spear, and so we give it back, knowing there's possibility. And let me just say, as a parent, this is a difficult thing to do. Because we don't want our children to be hurt. We don't want our family to be hurt. But I tell you what'll hurt them more than anything is you just hold on to all those spears in their life, and then you wait till they turn 18, 19, 20. And you're going to be holding all of these spears, wishing you were holding your child. You have to reach a point. Forgiveness returns the spear. Well, isn't there possibility? Yep. And I tell you, you can have the greatest conversation with your child and you can have a heart-to-heart moment. But there is nothing more productive than when the Holy Spirit of God starts having that conversation in their heart because they're doing what is wrong. And they come to God on their own and they come just saying, God, I am so sorry. I was given the spear and I didn't use it right. There is no conversation that you can have with your child that is more powerful than that. Because that is God speaking to their heart, saying, you have a spear in your hand, and it can be dangerous, and it can be a tool for bad, and it can be used in a wrong way, but it can also be used for right. And it can be used to fight for what is godly, and what is pure, and what is precious. What a wonderful thing it is when our children make that decision. But if they never have the spear, they never have the chance. If you take away the spear, how will they learn to resist temptation? If you take away the spear, where will responsibility come from? If you take away the spear, how will they prove their loyalty? If you take away the spear, how do they identify with the new change, this new desire to be right? And I don't think I have to say it for God to speak to your hearts, but young people, you have spears in your life. Use them right. Use them for God. Use them for God's honor and God's glory. And don't make your parents take the spears out of your life. Let me go even deeper here, because this is one that perhaps some struggle with even more. When spears are thrown by your parents, and I am not talking to children, I'm talking to adults. When spears were thrown by your parents many years ago, it reaches the point you have to give the spear back. You know how many people today still don't let their parents see their grandchildren because of something that was done years ago? Well, my children will never stay at their house because they did this. Isn't there a possibility that they'll say a bad word around them? Absolutely. It's hard telling what they're going to say. And we pray for them. And is there a chance they're going to say some things? Is there a chance they're going to do some things? Now, I'm not talking about their lives being at risk or safety measures. I'm talking about they may not do everything we want, but I'm not going to steal their spears away from them because of something they did. There comes a time when they have that opportunity to prove that they love your family and they love your children and they're trusting you and they're for you, even though there may be disagreements. One of the most difficult things in our married life is when we had those tough conversations with family, because at one point every family thing was scheduled on Sunday and our family was the only one who couldn't go. Those are hard things. And many people thought it was ridiculous. Come on, it's just your family, it's just 2 or 3 times a year, just go. And that was difficult. But we didn't take that decision and then just take everything away from them. We held our ground. We loved them. We went different days. We went afterwards. We did everything we could to still show our love, and that we were not holding anything against them. And the wonderful thing was, eventually they reached a point, nothing now is scheduled on a Sunday. It's all works around so the whole family can be there. But I'm saying if we would have held onto the spears, we never would have seen those adjustments. We never would have seen the changes. Perhaps there's some here that you're still holding something against your parents and you're using your children as a tool to get revenge. Well, I say shame on you if that's the case. It reaches a point, not every parent. I think it's interesting. You can ask parents here. We can even have this test. Brother Derek's usually the only one willing to admit it. But we'll have a test here. How many here, as a parent, you would say that you have a favorite child? No? Okay. Now let's return it. How many here think your parents had a favorite child? Yeah, right? It's funny how that works, isn't it? That means this: somebody wasn't the favorite. All guilty parties, say aye. But if spears were thrown by your parents, you must reach a point that you give them back. Wasn't there potential? Yep. Possibility? Yes. Danger? Yes. Let me, summarize with 2 more. And I'll be quick on these because they're a little more personal. When spears are thrown by a spiritual leader, you must reach a point that you give them back. There's no possible way that we can attend church together for however many years that God allows us to, and there not be something said that you don't agree with, or something said that was potentially hurtful, or something that was done that could have been absolutely wrong. But I ask you as a pastor, don't hold on to that spear and not let me be your pastor. There reaches a point that you have to give it back. Because if you don't let me be your pastor, then your spouse will not have me as a pastor, and your children will see, and they will not have a pastor. And how many people in our world today, because of their relationship with their pastor, they hold on to that spear. And again, it's a lot like a marriage. Sometimes it's not even their current pastor. It's a pastor of the past. And so they hold on to this spear, and they never give it back, and they go through their entire life never really have a pastor fighting beside them, because they hold on to the spear. Well, can I encourage you the best I can, being in an awkward situation? Give me a chance with the spear again. Don't keep it from me. If somebody hurt you in the past, if it was me, if something was done, matter of fact, I'm not even going to say if. Whatever it was that has been done, that you don't agree, or you would have done different, or you would have said different, I understand it. I don't expect, you know how many words I say in a year? How crazy would it be to think everybody's going to agree with them? But I also ask you, don't come in here looking for what you disagree with. Come in here looking for the common ground and saying, here is the spiritual. Yes, there's things that can be done, and there are things that can go different than what I think, but I have to return the spear. Because if we're not going to fight together on this, it's not going to be a good fight. Because we have a world out here that wants your children and wants my children. And if we're not going to fight on the same team, if we're going to hold each other's weapons because we don't want the other person to have one, how foolish are we in setting ourselves up for the attacks of the enemy? There reaches a point that we have to give the spear back. Now let me turn this around the other way, because I think it's appropriate. When spears are thrown by the congregation, there reaches a point as a pastor, I have to give the spear back. Because just as things are going to be done by me, I want to make sure everybody's sitting down. Sometimes things are going to be said and done by you that I don't agree with. I know, shocking. And I may ask for testimonies one night by chance, and not have any of these seasoned God's people who know his mercies are new every morning stand and say, I'm just thankful for the week. That might happen sometime. Kidding, of course. But how foolish would it be for me to say, you know what, I'm never asking testimonies again. But yet there are pastors who handle things that way. So just as I ask you, if you're holding on to that spear, I would say, there comes a point when you give it back, I would say the same thing to you. That God help me to never hold anything, a decision or something that's said, and hold on to that and never return. One of the things when you get into ministry, you'll hear people say it all the time, is people will hurt you. People will hurt you. And it's true, but I would say the blessings far outweigh the hurts. But believe it or not, I like talking to new Christians on these things. Believe it or not, Brother John and Miss Brenda, there are some people who think that a pastor shouldn't get close to anybody because they might hurt them. Can I say what joys are being missed? I love being close to our people. And yes, you see me in my everyday, and you see me when those rare occasions when I'm in a goofy mood or something of that sort, and you get to see that side of me, and you don't always see me all professional and in the suit and everything coming together, but you get to see me at every phase of life, and I know that reveals weaknesses, I know that reveals shortcomings, I know that reveals conversations that maybe are personal, but I say thank God for those moments, and yes, you're going to see parts of me, and I'm going to see parts of you, but when something happens, let's not hold on to the spears. But know that there comes a time when we have to give them back. Because we have to be in this fight together. Husband and wife, you have to be in this fight together. Mom and dad and children, you have to be in this fight together. Parents, grandparents, you need to be in this fight together. And church, we must be in this fight together. Well, is there possibilities? Yes. Is there potential? Yes. Is there danger? Yes. but there's also great possibility to move forward. So every now and then, we got to give the spear back and put it in God's hands. What a great verse 23 is. Let the Lord render. I'm going to put it in the Lord's hands, but I'm going to return the spear. Heads are bowed.